Well, up north, down south, the complaints of Nigerians are the same. Insecurity. Regardless of place and position, it's now the feared neighbor behind our backs, now existent in different forms, carrying different objectives, affecting different people in different ways. Insecurity is making Nigeria lose its bright, brilliant color and appeal. Terrorism, banditry and robbery, abductions, and many more have become commonplace in Nigeria. Decade-long battles now threaten the common unity of a people, attempting to throw spanners in the works and livelihoods of many. Yet, this is home, the only option of hundreds of millions of Nigerians. New ideas, solutions to these challenges is again our focus today on VSA. Welcome, I'm Sulaiman. The roots of the trouble are still subject to who's telling the story. They've come in different versions with religious and political underpinnings. The big powers of the world have been blamed for the problems. Unbelievable or hardly believable names have been tagged as sponsors of these troubles. But the stories have done little or nothing to stop the killings, maiming and wastage of lives and properties. Families have been separated, bubbly communities have been turned to silent footpath, schools have been razed, students, pupils, parents have been scarred. Now, painfully, every missing piece amounts to wasted lives across the country without tribal or religious affiliations. The enemy is common, and so should be the fight. What are the solutions? Joining me to unpack this this evening is Dickon, Osajie, and joining me from Nigeria's capital is Kabir, Adamu, both security experts. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Let's start with you, Kabir. We've heard lots of stories. You've been on the show, a couple of times about the source of Nigeria's current security challenges. Names have been called or pointed, fingers at some hallowed chambers like the National Assembly. How important is dealing with this problem from the roots?
Thank you, Suleiman. And yes, you're right. We have discussed this issue severally, and we've emphasized the importance of addressing the root causes. If there's an ailment and all you're doing is treating the symptoms, then it's not likely that that ailment would be healed. All you do is probably suppress it, and in some instances it would even get worse. So that's how important it is to look at the root causes. And what are these root causes? We've talked about if a politician, as it were, even though he still remains in the realm of allegation, but these are allegations that have been hinted at by the number one citizen, that's the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. In his last speech, not his last speech, the speech on the 65th independence anniversary, he hinted at the fact that a parliamentarian is suspected of funding at least an aspect of the security challenges in the country. Several other indications have arisen. I mean, the most spoken about one is the sting operation in the United Arab Emirates that indicted a couple of Nigerians and that whose names were shared with Nigerian regulatory agencies. In fact, we were told that that sting operation had the participation of Nigerian agencies, and yet none of them has been prosecuted. However, we do know that a significant number have been arrested, but then the revelation as to who they are, what they did wrong, has not been made public. Now, around all of this is one important element, which is the element of deterrence. If you have an administration of criminal justice system that is ineffective, that does not arrest and punish offenders, then that deterrence element would be completely missing. And that means the young person who decides to, commit a crime would have it at the back of his head that he's likely to, escape the law and not be prosecuted. So the deterrence element in that administration of criminal justice system is almost completely missing. And that means more people would be now, embracing that type of offense. And so the lawlessness, unfortunately, that has permeated society will continue as long as offenders are not arrested and they are not punished. So in essence, the failure to arrest and punish offenders, irrespective of their ethnicity, their religion, their social status, is one of, if not the most significant root cause of the security challenge in the country. There are several others, perhaps in the course of the conversation we'll speak, but I'll stop here for now.
Well, Kabir, thanks. Let me quickly come to the studio to Dickon. Dickon, you've heard Kabir, and I know you also, like many Nigerians, watched the president on October 1 when he spoke. Now, we're taking out the issue of security. And since after that day, we've also seen a rep member raise a motion on the floor of the House asking the president to please tell us exactly who this colleague of ours is. But again, listening to the president, did you get the feeling that Nigeria is getting closer to one of the root cause, of the problem?
Well, thank you very much, Suleiman, and nice being here. I listened to the speech, and for me, I think we are playing with human lives. We've lost the value of human lives here in Nigeria, and looking at the multi-dimensional threats we have been faced here in Nigeria, I had thought that the government would have, prioritized the security risk in Nigeria. It's not all about coming to the National Assembly or coming on air and telling the public that one or two persons in the National Assembly are involved in sponsoring this spread of insecurity in Nigeria. That is a defeat on intelligence. When we talk about intelligence, you need to be very, very careful not to let out some intelligence components that could be useful to the intelligence community. These guys that the president spoke about, without mentioning their names, could go back to the drawing board and plan their strategies or how they'll be able to take a departure from that list. Security is achievable, and I always believe that security is achievable. When you go into the global terrorism index, you'll see that we're not doing so well. We are being ranked the third most affected terrorist state in the world, and Nigeria is among the first 15 most dangerous countries in the world. That is not good for our image. When we talk about perception management, no one or no investors who want to come to Nigeria to invest his funds in a country that security is not living to expectation. Before we achieve this state of insecurity, we must fall back to leadership. Because the reason why we are expressing this high state of insecurity boils down on leadership. These leaders were voted into power to protect the territorial integrity of Nigeria. There's a line in the national item that states very clearly that the labor of our heroes past shall never be in vain. That's an oath taken. Each time we sing that national anthem, that line, we are taking an oath that we will definitely protect the labor of our heroes past. But here we are not protecting the labors of our heroes past. We are sabotaging the labors of our heroes past. We're suffering from political brutality. We're suffering from ethnocentric brutality. We're also suffering from religious brutality, ethnocentric brutality, unemployment brutality, a lot of brutality, because more people think that police brutality is the problem we have in Nigeria. Police brutality is the least problem we have in Nigeria. Until our leaders fall back to the drawing board and ascertain and, project reasonable leadership mechanisms, we will suffer a lot of high state of insecurity. You see most of our leaders, what they do? They will fly from their states to London, United States, to go and take treatment, to go and go for medical...
sorry to cut you there. Let me quickly come to Kabir now, because now you're talking about leadership. And I'll come back so that you can explain it more, because if you say that's, a minus on the intelligence, some would say perhaps that's a gain for anyone to have been able to put a finger on some of these, highly placed Nigerians as sponsors to what Nigeria is dealing with. Will mean a big plus. And who knows if they're not in custody yet before that announcement was made. Kabir, Dickon has said a lot about leadership. And we have seen how much of some movements by governors, especially those in Nigeria's southeast and southwest, laws like the anti-open grazing law, have actually caused hot debates in Nigeria. If you look at that, to what extent can this help solve the current security challenge in Nigeria?
So security, Suleiman, is total. You cannot cherry pick on the issues that are causing security. And by cherry picking, all you end up doing is creating bigger challenges. And I started with this foundation, and I'll explain what I mean. My understanding, and I've taken my time to read through and analyze the content of the anti-open grazing law, at least the one passed by Benue State, which perhaps has been so far the most controversial. Now, my understanding is that that law was passed to solve a security challenge, which is that of banditry. The general agreement, consensus among Nigerians at the moment is that open grazing is no longer tenable and that we need to move to ranching or perhaps some other more advanced way of livestock rearing. There are several others. Ranching is one of them, but the consensus seems to be on ranching. And so the state government, in a bid to address the security challenge, passed that law. But unfortunately, and this is me coming from my enterprise security risk management background, when I read through that document, I saw, unfortunately, that there are clauses inside that negates the three principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so if those clauses are allowed, we are likely to create a bigger challenge more than the one that we've solved. So assuming, for instance, and I know this is contentious, it's been debated, assuming the anti-open grazing law has solved the security challenge, and I use the word assuming because frankly it hasn't. There are banditry and killings are still happening in Benue State, unfortunately, and that's a topic for discussion in another day. But it leads me to my opening remarks that you cannot cherry pick security. A couple of years, 3 years ago, a group I was working with that were essentially working, for my organization, were abducted in the border area between Taraba and Benue. So I know these things. I'm not giving, a secondhand, account. This is something I know. Now, when we investigated, it turned out that there is a local militia whose leader is dead now, that has been, as it were, abducting people and forcibly conscripting them into that militia. Now, is that militia of Fulani extraction? Unfortunately, no. So I'm trying to bring a point. A law has been passed to address banditry, but that law was targeted at a particular ethnic group because there was an impression that that ethnic group was behind the banditry. Unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, it turned out that that group is not the only group behind the banditry. If today all Fulanis are eradicated from Benue, those incidences are still happening like we're seeing today. So point I'm trying to make is when you make laws without comprehension of all the issues at play on ground, and you address it perhaps on the basis of a particular ethnic grouping, then you're not likely to achieve the successes that you want to achieve. I haven't had the opportunity to look at the other laws passed by several other states. I think at the last count, about 18 or 19 states have passed the anti-open grazing law. Now, I'm hoping that they took cognizance of those clauses that were against inclusion and diversity, as well as equity within the country. When you say, for instance, that a particular ethnic group cannot leave land in a particular state because they are not indigents, I mean, that's totally against the laws of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is if that law was created to solve a security challenge, unfortunately, it's likely to create a bigger challenge because of this opposition to equity and justice, as it were.
Well, thanks, Kabir. I come back to you, Dickon, listening to Kabir and also listening to some of your key, opening comments. One is forced to ask the question of the efforts of governments across the country. For Kabir, he said something which is very important, and it would seem as if that's what the governors are doing, cherry picking, and in the basket, it looks like they just have been able to pick one. And Nigeria is dealing with quite a number, as you highlighted, quite a number, and that is why you're also putting your finger on leadership. Quickly here, states like Zamfara have had to cut all forms of mobile communications, and as much as Nigerians criticize that move, the country had a lot of gains in that. So what more should the people be, what kind of support should the people be giving to the security experts like yourselves, your colleagues who are there trying to unravel this mystery of, banditry, kidnapping, and of course, terrorism in the country?
All right, let me start from kidnapping. The kidnap market is taking a boom right now, and when you go...
Even at the moment?
Yeah, even at the moment. Formerly, we're suffering from a high spate of robbery. Highway robbery, bank robbery, and a lot of robbery. But the period in which the kidnap market took the boom was at the arrest of Evans. The Nigerian police did not manage the arrest of Evans very well because on this form of parading of suspects, I think Lagos State have passed a law to eliminate the parading of suspects. Because sometimes when you parade suspects and you ask this suspect to demonstrate how he carried out his crime, you are enlisting more criminals. When Evans was arrested, he was paraded, and the world got to know he made billions from kidnapping, and that was why most of the media house, introduced Evans as billionaire kidnappers. And those guys at home feel that, hey, man, there's more money in kidnapping, and that's where the kidnap market begins to take the boom. Why did it take the boom? Because the risk implication in kidnapping is lower compared to the risk implication in robbery. Take, for instance, you want to go and rob a bank in Adiola or Deku here in Victoria Island. You need to get your men, get your arms and ammunition, and there's possibility you might lose a man or two guys in action during engagement with the police. So the risk implication is very high. Now, kidnapping, you just pick anyone on the street, jogging, moving, or carry out a surveillance against any high-profile personality. You evacuate such person and demand for ransom and quick money. And that's why most of Nigerians, a lot of Nigerians went into the kidnap market because they believe that the risk implication is very, very low. And that situation.
A lot or some?
A lot of Nigerians, I mean to say, they went into the kidnap market because if you see now kidnapping happening in the West, happening in the East, happening in the South, everywhere, just of recent, an Air Vice Marshal of the Nigerian Air Force was kidnapped. Two other people were kidnapped here in Lagos. So that is the negative aspect of the police in which the area of, what's it called, parading suspects. I think they should eliminate such, because sometimes you see a criminal will be telling you how he gets the gun, where he hides the gun. We don't need that. We don't need to know about that because there are a lot of jobless Nigerians out there in the streets. Coming back to what you're talking about as well, looking at the crime threat, we suffering so like RSA, we're having suffering from multi-dimensional security threat. And I have said earlier that our security is achievable. What the problem is, first of all, we need to identify the causative factors. What are the causative factors? How did we arrive at this stage as a country? How did we arrive at this stage as Nigeria? What went wrong? And what do we need to do to ensure that things are going on right? You likely say that what are we supposed to do? What do citizens do? I earlier talked about leadership, Suleiman. We need to look at social contract because sometimes the governments just feel that the citizens are not making things conducive. A lot of Nigerians are going to crime and a lot of atrocities. What's transpired? The government itself, our leaders have breached the social contract they have with the citizens. If that social contract was not breached, I don't think we would have arrived at this high speed of insecurity. If you want the citizens to live and obey the government of the day, you need to give them employment, social contract. You need to give them education, social contracts. You need to give them good roads, social contracts. You understand what I'm saying? Because a jobless man on the street is a potential threat to the society. And that is why Boko Haram, in their enlistment methodology, they have a lot of fighters. They go to the jobless guys, tell these jobless guys that, hey guys, we have a lot of funds for you guys. If the government cannot take good care of you, we have dollars. And I must tell you the truth for free, that most of these fighters of Boko Haram, they are paid in pounds and dollars. You know what I'm saying? So when we go into the social contract, the government must start looking at not bridging the social contract. When we start respecting the rights of the citizens, then our space of insecurity will begin to mitigate.
Well, again, I still think that in a nation that is about 200 million, it would be right to say some Nigerians have actually gone into kidnapping and not most Nigerians.
Some Nigerians, yeah.
So let's come to you, Kabir. You know, we've seen how important geospatial analysis can actually help in security management. Your team has actually been working and giving some updates on some of the key things Nigeria has been doing. I made mention of the telecommunication that was cut in some parts of the country. And tell us again, let's hear from you rather, if that actually has worked and how much of gain the Nigerian troop got with that singular action. And again, is it high time Nigeria invested heavily on the Aerospace Management Agency? Because some still think that that is one open space that Nigeria is yet to plug in to see how some of these criminal elements can be routed.
So, Suleiman, this is a contentious issue, and I take issues around human rights very important. I am one of the few security practitioners who is hesitant to place security over and above human rights. And I say this with all sense of responsibility. My military, peers would always justify, and sometimes even lawyers, and that's what surprised me. I'm starting with this background because I'm about the constitutionality of the extraordinary measures that were instituted in those states. As far as I know, almost all of the pronouncements were by executive fiat. And we're in a democracy. At the state level, you've got the executive arm of government, you've got the legislature, and you've got the judiciary. My thinking, if we're going to embrace our democratic norms and practices, is that at least, if nothing, the legislature should have had a role to play in all of this. Now, if the legislature had had a role, perhaps palliatives would have been put in place for members of the society. You have seen, and I'm certain Dickon too has seen, and a lot of listeners would have seen women putting petrol, in bags and tying those bags to their back and not putting into consideration the volatility of what they are holding and how, if there is a fire, everyone, including them in that vehicle, will be dead. Now, the question to ask is, what would make a woman do that? Living conditions have been affected. Law-abiding citizens who are living in these states are no longer able to fend for themselves and their families. And I'm not aware that any palliative measure, any provisions have been made by this government to cushion the effects of these extraordinary measures in the local governments where they were implemented. At the last count, we had about 78 local governments that were affected by those extraordinary measures. Unfortunately, we don't know the number of persons that were in those 78 local governments, but imagine even if there were 1,000 people multiplied by 78, and you have an idea of the number of Nigerians whose rights have been denied in the name of security. Now, the most worrisome component of all of this is that despite the denial of these rights,
Kabir, sorry, let me throw this in, because it would seem as if this whole analysis is more or less like that of a class struggle. Let me paint this scenario. We've seen a lot of states in Nigeria ban motorcyclists, operation of motorcyclists, popularly called Okada. And it's because one or two or three cases of, criminalities have, criminals have used the motorbikes to perpetrate their crimes. And people have been asking, are you going to ban cars, if the criminals start using cars. So the issue of telecommunication, is it because it has affected almost everyone in such locality, and that is why people like yourself have started thinking of rights? Because it would seem as if all those who are bikers or who ride bikes in some of these key cities also have rights, but no one has been speaking on their behalf.
I have been speaking on their behalf. Like I said earlier on, I place the issue of rights very importantly. And you cannot have security if there is no justice, if there is no equity, and there is no fairness. I'm not in any way suggesting that the extraordinary measures were not necessary. They may have been necessary, but my point is this: why would you not make provisions for the law-abiding citizen? At the end of the day, you want to make sure you win the hearts and minds of residents. Any insurgency, counter-insurgency, or anti-banditry campaign that does not win the hearts and minds of the people, that does not carry them along, is an act in futility. I gave the example of women who were circumventing the ban and were tying foil on themselves and taking to these bandits. Were they doing it because they loved the bandits? No, it was just to get money and feed their family. So clearly, the government did not involve in advocacy and awareness campaign to make the people understand what they were trying to do and provide for the law-abiding ones. And Suleiman, this is significant because someone in Lagos may not really understand, the nature of how bad it is in some of these communities. Let's go back to the MBS statistics on poverty. In Sokoto State, as an example, the poverty rate, according to MBS, was 87%. That means for every 10 persons that you pick, at least 8 of them were living below the poverty. And then in Lagos, it's about 4%. So what this means, for example, is deny someone in a particular local government the ability to come out in one day to sell whatever it is that he's selling to feed his family. And that will be the difference between him and his family not eating. Now you've done that for about a month without making any provisions to say, okay, law-abiding persons, this is what we'll give you during that 1 month. So yes, it's a class thing, but I'm looking at it not necessarily from the class thing, but from the consequence and the effect it's going to have on security. We did a barometer at the early stages of the enforcement, and we found out that a significant percentage of residents supported the ban. But I can bet you if we do the same barometer now, it's very likely that percentage has reduced significantly. And why? Right. Just because of necessity.
We'll take a moment. When we come back, we'll look more about, the porosity of Nigeria's border in terms of security and some of the key things, Kabir, you've also raised, and that is buying in the support of the people in the fight against insecurity in Nigeria. That's when we return. Well, it's our home run here on Village Square Africa on New Central Television, and I will see how two security experts here with us looking at the security situation in Nigeria. Kabir Adamu in Nigeria's capital, Abuja, and of course with me here in the studios is Dickon Osajie. Let me come to you, Dickon, before we go to Kabir. Let's quickly, start talking about some key solutions which both of you have started. Keep in mind, it started first, from a particular region, and now it will seem as if the entire geopolitical zone in Nigeria has one form of security challenge or the other. Now, from porosity of the border, which I'll take to Kabir, but let's talk about what Nigeria is dealing with at the moment. There is IBOP in the east of the country, kidnapping, insurrection, or attempt to foment trouble by some people in the guise of agitation. How is this going for the people now and the government? We talk about, Kabir said something about the people buying in. How can the people help in cases where some of these people are not known in such communities? For instance, what is being done to some people in places like Plateau State, Benue State, and even in Kaduna State. So what can the people do to help safeguard their communities?
Well, first of all, before we identify the possibility, we need to look at theory of victory. The government needs to start looking at theory of victory. Because what we need now, we need theory of victory, and we also need to start looking at management of our security forces. One of the reasons why we also got to this stage is the mismanagement of our military. The military is supposed to be the last resort in any security issues, not the first resort. The reason why the military needs to be the last resort is that you need to pass through the continuum of security projection. If an incident transpires, sending the police. If that supersedes the power of the police, sending the mobile. If that supersedes the power of the mobile, then the military will come and play as the last resort. But at any given time, our government are quick to project the military. And that's why this local balance, known as see-finish, comes to play. Like what transpired in Maiduguri during the emergence of Boko Haram, the government will quickly projected military might. Military might must always be the last resort. And if you want to get things right in Nigeria, we must start looking at application of force as the last resort. You
didn't think the issue of Boko Haram was an outright war against the Nigerian state that required the military intervention?
It wasn't, initially it wasn't an outright war. When Muhammad was killed, the people took an insurrection against the Nigerian state. And if perhaps the military or the government had gone into negotiation at that incipient stage, we wouldn't have arrived at this stage. But they just feel that, hey, just get rid of all of them, And in this 21st century, where we have, like you rightly talk about the porosity of our national borders, we have Libyans that just get out of war and other countries. Small arms and weapons will definitely come into Nigeria. And about 10 million arms that are found in Africa, illegal arms that are found in Africa, about 70 to 80% here in Nigeria in the hands of non-state actors. So for me, when we want to get things right, we must first of all carry out a vulnerability analysis of what the problem is, because carrying out vulnerability analysis begins with asking questions. What is the problem? The problem in Nigeria is that we are suffering from this high state of insecurity. What is the solution? We've projected police might, we've projected military might. Now, does that solve the problem? You and I believe that the projection of the military has not solved the state of security in Nigeria. So what should the government do? Now, what the government needs to start doing is that we need to start looking into integration of the people, integration of our traditional rulers. Few days ago, the governors met in Enugu, or where the Southeast governors met, and they didn't even invite the traditional rulers. I had expected that most of these traditional rulers from all the nooks and crannies of the Southeast must be involved, because they are much aware about the people in their community. If we don't start integrating our traditional rulers into security, we will not get things right. Now, if we want to get things properly now, we need to start looking at crime prevention through environmental design, in the sense that we need to start looking into territorial reinforcement. If we don't have enough territorial reinforcement, we will not excel, because definitely Nigeria is under invasion now. Invasion in the sense that from the east, west, south, and north, we're suffering from multi-dimensional security threat. Any country that suffers from multi-dimensional security threat is being invaded. We are not a failed state yet, but we are a fragile state. A fragile state is a state that can, in any time, become a failed state. So Nigeria is in a fragile state now. For us to get out of that fragile state, we need to start looking into military might. We need to start building our military capacity, building our police capacity. Right now, these guys are hitting hard on our security, killing our soldiers every day, killing our police every day. How did we arrive at this stage? When I joined the army in the 90s, it's impossible for you to kill a soldier. when you kill a soldier, that community will be smoked because these soldiers are the ones upholding the sovereignty of our great nation. So we must not allow people to kill our soldiers anyhow. We must go into the nooks and crannies, carry out crime mapping. If you don't carry out crime mapping, you cannot project necessary security force. Take, for example, in Lagos here, you want to carry out a crime mapping. Where are the crime-prone areas in Lagos State? Osajie will be a crime-prone area. Then you tick it in the crime mapping. What other part of Lagos is a crime-prone area? Mushin is a crime-prone area. Ojota, Maito are crime-prone areas. Ajegunle are crime-prone areas. You indicate them in a crime mapping. Having indicated those crime-prone areas in a crime mapping, then you project reasonable security force. Because for you to attack security issues, it has to deal with the strategic level, operational level, and tactical level. The problem we're having is not strategic. Government are releasing the funds. We see on national TV, we see budgets being released by government. That is strategic level. Operational levels, then down to tactical level. The problem is we need to address what the problem is in the tactical level.
You know, let me take you back to what you said about bringing in the army, which you said should have been the last resort. Is that indicative of a failed police system? Now, talking about the Nigerian police.
Yeah. It is an indication of a failed police system because most times we don't give our police, because for you to build confidence in somebody, for example, you have someone understudying you or your subordinate, you need to give him some duties, for him to, build confidence. If you don't give them confidence, they will not succeed. So people just feel, oh, Nigerian police cannot do it. Send the military. You don't send the military. You understand what I'm saying? The military must, okay, let me give you an instance. When I was in Cross River State, when I was in the army, an incident was taking place in Ogoja, and we were in Ecom local government, and they asked us to go to that locality close to Ogoja. And as soldiers, before we left the military base, those criminal guys within that environment, they've dispersed. Why? Because of the fear of the military. Our soldiers have lost that integrity. They've lost that fear because the engagement. If you go to most of our barracks now, I'm sorry to say.
But again, sorry to cut you there. But I'm trying to think because we've seen time was when Boko Haram was, they hoisted flags in some communities, and when these communities were, won, over by the Nigerian military. Tell us, shouldn't the police have gone in there to maintain civil life?
Thank you very much. That's a very intelligent question, Suleiman. You see, when it comes to engaging the enemy, the military, the mistake the Nigerian army are playing in the Northeast is that they are playing three roles at the same time. That's very wrong. They go after the enemy, take over territory, and rebuild the territory. You don't take hold and rebuild. You take over the territory. The police hold that territory. Then the National Retention Agency and other developmental agency comes to rebuild the agency. But here our military go over the enemy, capture the territory, and remain on the defensive line. Staying in the defensive line in the battlefield is an act of weakness. In the battlefield as soldiers, you don't stay in the defense line. You go before the enemy, decimate the enemy by day, decimate the enemy by night, deny the enemy sleep by day, deny them sleep by night, decimate them day in and day out with the integration of the Nigerian Air Force. But here our Air Force will go for bombardment. Having bombarded this enemy, the ground troops, which are the soldiers that are supposed to go after the Air Force have done that bombardment, will not go and cleans up the environment or carry out cleansing or clean the environment. So the lack of integration made us to suffer losses, and Boko Haram began to take territory. That is where insurgents began to build, because there's a difference between terrorism and insurgency. So I'm very grateful for the set of Chief of Army Staff we had now. I think there is collaboration, there's integration between the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and that is why I must tell you for free that these guys are finding it so hot there in the Northwest and Northeast.
Well, I don't know if Kabir is back. Well, it looks like I lost connection to Kabir. But quickly here, coming back to the collaborative effort of the military and, every other agency fighting, terror in Nigeria. Key point here you raised. You said something about the traditional institution in Nigeria, and you want to see more action, more activity within the traditional institution to see how they can also help. Let us in on this, because time was when some of those who were actually casualties were traditional rulers and even religious leaders. Are you saying Nigeria hasn't actually done enough by integrating or bringing the traditional institution and the religious leaders into the scheme of this fight against criminals and insurgents?
No. I earlier told you about religious brutality, police brutality, ethnocentric brutality. When you look at the, first of all, let's take a look at the ethnography of Nigeria. Nigeria is sitting on the 923,000 square kilometers. We have over 520 languages. We have over 250 ethnic groups and over 372 over 250 tribes and over ethnic groups and over 370 tribes. That alone is a natural trait on its own. You know, as a Christian, there was a time in the story in the Bible where some guys were trying to build a tower to go and see God because they have a unity of purpose. They speak one language, and that was where the diverse tribes comes to play. There is unity of purpose in language barrier. One of the problems we're suffering from here in Nigeria, looking at the ethnography of Nigeria, is tribalism, ethnocentrism, and religious brutality. The Christians and the Muslims need to start telling ourselves the truth. What are you telling the people in the mosques about the Christians? What are you telling the people in the church about the Muslims? Are you telling the people in the mosques that the Christians are infidel? Are you telling the people in the church that the Muslims are infidel? That is really going to build hatred among our people. I was born in Maiduguri, Borno State. I grew up in Sokoto State and Zaria State before I joined the Nigerian military in the 90s. I live with most of these Fulani people. They are nice people. I live with most of these Hausa people. They are loving people. They are very caring people. That was where I grew up. And what amazes me is how the emergence of these Fulani guys, how they became automatically notorious guys, because these are guys, their strongest weapon are sticks. And I wonder how they migrated into carrying AK-47. If we want to get things right, we need to bring...
You think, sorry to take you back, you think these same AK-47 wielding marauding killers are the same, people of the Fulani stock you grew up with?
I disagree. Yes, we have some of the Fulani guys. I don't want to use the word most, like I rightly said earlier. Yes. That was a slip of tongue. Some of these Fulani guys, we cannot just try to brutalize the Fulani nation. If we do that, we are not doing justice to the Fulani nation. We have a lot of great guys that are Fulani people who are doing so well. Kabir Adamu, the analyst, is a Fulani man. Are you hearing me? So most of these guys just what we call deception, Suleiman. Deception plays a very big role here in the Nigerian state. Deception in the sense that since the Fulani guys are being propagated that they're the one causing mayhem in Nigeria, some guys will just dress up, go and commit a crime somewhere, and they'll just leave some trace or mark of some Fulani attires and everything. Then the police will start looking at different direction. And that's why sometimes when you catch most of these criminals, you'll find out that some of them truly were not Fulani. Some of them are from Edo State, some of them are from Yoruba, some of them are Igbo, some of them are from different tribes. So deception played a very big role here in the country. And that's why the president as a Fulani man needs to do a lot, because the long-time silence of our president made us to arrive at this stage, because he hardly addressed Nigerians. And at the time, I was thinking that the president was keeping malice with Nigeria. And I said to myself, how will a president of a nation be keeping malice? Come and address, guys. Like during the NSAS killing, he refused to address the nation until pressure mounted before he came on air and addressed the nation. We need to start looking at leadership consistency. He needs to come on air and continue to talk to us, time without numbers. For me, I think open grazing is a crime against humanity. As a Fulani man, in the time of your reign, are you telling me that the best thing that you would do for the Fulani people is to propagate or preach open grazing? Open grazing should be seen as a crime against our children. These guys are supposed to be in school. Do you expect them to start walking from Sokoto State to Lagos State? That's an act of animal behavior. Do you expect them to start walking from Lagos State here to Ibadan by foot? That is an act of inhuman behavior. We must eliminate open grazing. It shouldn't be a subject of discussions, because we should have a nation whereby we look at Holland, for example. They are producing this milk that are produced from cows. So what do we do? We should start looking at ranching, so that we'll be able to mitigate the threat. Farmers and herders clashes. How do we resolve farmers and herder clashes? Let's assume this is a cow and this is a farm. Farms are immovable objects. They are not movable, while cows are movable. The problem here is that if you want to ascertain what is the causative factors of the conflict, definitely it's the cows that are moving to this farm to eat the farm produce of these farmers. So we need to eliminate, stop talking about open grazing. It's not even a subject of discussion. Start sending those guys that are doing this open grazing to school. If we start sending them to school, they get education, definitely Nigeria will be a better place.
Let me quickly bring in here some of the key concerns of Nigerians, and that has to do with the locals who give intelligence to the authorities. They say sometimes they are amazed that they get attacked, you know, and they wonder if such intelligence are being protected. So we're talking about two key protection here: the information you give and the informant as well. So how can the Nigerian government, you know, give some form of assurance that whoever is volunteering information is truly protected?
Well, for me, I would advise informants to, you know, display their identity, and that is why sometimes in advanced world there are certain numbers you need to, you know, send in information to, or maybe an email where you can also send a mail to, and also inform the police or the security agent that there's a crime in progress in this particular environment. If we don't checkmate the attack on our informant, the security agency will suffer information. They will not get information. And to be very honest with you, they're really suffering from that because they are not succeeding with their information. When I was in the Bakassi Peninsula, a lady came to us in the front line there and told us that some group of guys are coming in with some illegal products. And she told us the exact location where they're coming from. And we staged an ambush against those guys and we get rid of them. So we succeeded in that information management. And the lady was safe because nobody knew she gave us information. But it's quite regrettable that Boko Haram has projected some of their fighters into the military and security agents. And that is why sometimes I frown at these repentant Boko Haram programs because it's going to be detrimental to the survival of Nigeria in the nearest time. You could see what transpired in Afghanistan.
So why do you think so when you say in the nearest?
Yeah, what I think so is that insurgency is an ideological driven war. An ideological driven war is a war that could take till eternity. I can't just give up Jesus Christ that easy because I'm a Christian. And if you're a Muslim, you cannot give up the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. You understand? You can't give up those guys so easily because that's who you believe, that's what you believe. And when I come out as a terrorist and I said, I've repented, hey, definitely that repentance will not be from my mind. You see what transpired in Afghanistan, like I was trying to say earlier. The Americans invaded Afghanistan 21 years ago. Having invaded Afghanistan 21 years ago, it took the Taliban 11 days to take over Afghanistan. That is a failure of intelligence and that is a failure of military mechanism because the Americans were busy training some Taliban fighters without carrying out due diligence and intelligence network. And that was why immediately the American government evacuated the military troops from Afghanistan. Those guys came into the Kabul and took over power within 11 days.
What do you think is going on? And now as we close, what do you think is going on, especially lately? There's been a series of attacks on military formations and police posts and police stations. When you were in the military, well, you hardly would hear stories like this.
You don't try that. You'll be smoked out.
So what exactly is happening?
Well, what really is happening is that I told you that the military is supposed to be the last resort in any given time, and that is why we need to start looking at psychological components in engaging the enemy. Because from the tactical point of view, the military deployment strategies is very bad, very, very bad. Because that is why most times Boko Haram, if they are coming in with an attack, they will first of all carry out a surveillance about the military locations. Having carried out a surveillance about the military locations and discover that we have about a pocket of soldiers, maybe 1, 2, 6 soldiers or 10 soldiers, they will come in dozens, and when they come in dozens, they will overpower those soldiers. Our soldiers must not be deployed anyhow within crime-prone environments. That's why I told you about crime mapping. They need to start looking at risk assessment. If you don't carry out a risk assessment, you can't project mitigation factors because the military don't just get out of the barrack and go and deploy soldiers anyhow and in any type of locations. No, they need to understand the locations and understand the threats level in that location before they deploy those soldiers. Now, most of these guys, they are hitting hard on our soldiers. Why are they hitting hard on our soldiers? You know, they are trying to dissipate their morale, you know. One of the things most of these guys do is that the soldiers' morale must not be dissipated. That's why sometimes in the military we are consistently motivated that our morale level must remain high. The time your morale starts dissipating, then you're going to lose confidence. The battle begins from the mind. If your mind is not prepared, definitely any attack that comes your way you will run away. And what are we doing about our soldiers' family? Because the methodology in which you need to survive a military is to enlist the soldiers and retain the family. This time around in our own country, our soldiers' wives, we have a lot of widows in the barracks. What is happening to those widows? What will happen to their children? What is happening to their family? Because if you don't take care of those families that lost their fathers and brothers in the battlefield, those soldiers that are alive definitely sees what is happening in the barrack, and they will not be motivated. If an attack comes, definitely they will run away. We've been to Sierra Leone, we've been to Liberia. Nigeria has made a lot of name in the international community. But back home, the enemy are just playing with us like football.
In closing, do you think Nigeria should be speaking to some of its very best, those retired? Should they be having a conversation, more like recall some of these people who...
They will not go back. They will not come back. You can't recall me and I go back. And for me, I have not taken... I will not go back, because I'm sorry to say Nigerian is not worth dying for. Because when you put your life on the line, you are supposed to be well taken care of. The reason why, may I tell you why I left the military? I voluntarily disengaged from the military 19 years ago. That was when I resigned. That's about 20 years ago. Yeah, I applied voluntarily in 2002, and General Martin Luther Aguai, the then Chief of Army Staff, approved the application through my commanding officer. After we came back from the Bakassi Peninsula, I know what my guys in the U.S. Marine were making when they go to the battlefield. So when we go there, we eat rubbish, drink rubbish, and live like cows in the front line in the battlefield. We must start looking at soldiers' welfare, because we have 4 components in the battlefield. We have the software, you have the hardware, which are the arms and ammunition. You have the environment, and you have the liveware. The liveware are the soldiers. If you don't take care of your soldiers, you cannot succeed. If anything happened to a soldier, go for that soldier. Yeah, our soldiers dies in the battlefield. They bury them in the battlefield. Some of them don't receive a honorable burial. Well, that is one thing I love about the Americans. If a soldier dies in the battlefield, they would definitely put every mechanism in place to fly that soldier back home and give him a befitting burial. We must start looking at our security agent. We must start looking at the police. We must start looking at the military. The Nigerian military, for so long, I have said, we are playing a friendly match with this enemy. They need to activate a live match and start looking at protecting the territorial integrity of our nation. And our government must start looking at motivations. They must start looking at the hygienic factors of these soldiers. Because when you put your life on the line for your nation, anything you need as a soldier, your country should give to you. Those guys that resigned from the army, my father was a soldier. My elder brother was a soldier. My younger brother is still serving. He's putting in 20 years in service. In a family, we are about 4 soldiers. What has the government done for most of these soldiers' family, those that are retired? I just treated my father of some eye problem with my own funds. What are the government putting in place to ensure that those who have retired are well taken care of? Because those who are still in service are watching those that have retired.
Well, it's a fine place, even though a sad one, for us to close today. And the sour point is Nigeria is not worth dying for. And I'm hoping that the government will do something and listen to what you're saying, and ensure that that line you pointed out in the anthem of the of Nigeria, the heroes, past effort will not be in vain. Many thanks, Dickon, Osajie, and Kabir Adamu. And apologies, we just couldn't connect to Kabir again. We'll hope that he too will be back again to talk more on fighting insecurity in Nigeria. I'm Sulaiman. I'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.